read this and then walked out. I have a tendency to speak more off to my left than I do my right. And so everybody that sits over here is beginning to feel neglected. Oh. That's what it is.
So we're going to have to take turns and every other Wednesday.
Yeah, we're going to have to swap. We're going to have to swap over here, right? It says, then you will show discernment. Your lips will express what you've learned. For the lips, here we go. The lips of an immoral woman are as... I need to start over because I can't have her make an entrance on that verse. That's you just ruined the whole thing.
You done lost control already.
I know, and all she did was walk in.
Yeah.
Way to stage an entrance. Okay. Holy mackerel! This is gonna be one of them lessons. It's already a touchy subject, and now we've got. What's the matter, Bo? Are you feared?
It's a subject. Why do you remove the table?
It's the subject.
Yeah, it's the subject. Where is? Okay, I'm gonna back up so everybody can see my little cartoon.
Oh, that's nice.
Where's Rachel?
She's in the back.
Oh, she's in the back.
Yeah.
You just dated.
Okay, well, this is more aimed at the men folk anyway. So.
Is that your bear?
Yes, that's my bear. That's actually me right there before I had the mustache. Right? Yeah.
Thought so.
Yeah.
Lost some weight.
I'm gonna be taking you outside in a little while and beating you. For you, I'm just gonna say yes, ma'am. Okay. All right, Proverbs 1-6. I'm gonna try this again. Hopefully, nobody walks through the door on verse 3. But my son, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen carefully to my wise counsel. Then you will show discernment, and your lips will express what you've learned. For the lips of an immoral woman are as sweet as honey. Her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is as bitter as poison, as dangerous as a double-edged sword. I'm still checking the door. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. For she cares nothing about the path to life. She staggers down a crooked trail and doesn't realize it. Now, if you read this in the King James, and this is the reason I'm pulling the scriptures tonight out of the New Living Translation, it's a lot more poetic, but you have a tendency to go, wait, what? So here we see a little bit clearer the wording from the translation. So I want to keep in mind these scriptures. I'm going to leave my slide here where I can refer back to these scriptures. I want you to know that note that the characteristics of our nemesis are still being applied. No, we've already read these verses. There we go. The characteristics of our nemesis are still being applied. You know, we read last week about the evil men, the evildoers. They're loud. They're in your face. They're making overt appeals. Travis came to me afterwards. He goes, he said, it's almost like peer pressure. I said, dude, you got to wait till after I'm going to speak up when you get that kind of insight. So it's like peer pressure. So I managed to work that into tonight's lesson. So big thank you there. That's my little footnote. One could say it's peer pressure, right? It's overt. It's out in the open. But notice now when we get to the immoral woman, and we started this man-woman enemy or nemesis, right? Back in the first chapter. The evil men, the immoral woman. But here, the immoral woman is subtle, beguiling, right? Which just basically means lying her teeth out of her head, right? Using words that seduce the unwary. If you think of it this way, seduction is like a trap or a snare, right? You try to disguise it so it doesn't look anything like what it really is. The worm on the hook is seduction. Okay? The bear standing in the middle of the river just hooking fish as they go by, this is an upfront, overt kind of a thing. The fish can see the bear, right? It's not like, oh, look, a tasty morsel for lunch, and there's a hook inside of it, right? So the immoral woman, and keep in mind here that the man-woman imagery is simply used to enhance the tactics that we're going to face as we go through life, right? The things that will challenge us and our faith, that will challenge us to walk away from our faith. We'll use these same tactics. We go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? How did Satan approach Eve? Subtly, with beguilement, if you will, right? Oh, no, right? And just basically put, no, this is really good stuff, right? And so we see here that this same approach, and so that's the reason we've seen men and women, and we've seen them with the same characteristic definitions through these first 5 chapters. But this chapter is going to be just a little bit different. There is a practical side to this chapter. It is going to speak, while there is a spiritual element to it, the practical side is going to speak to the relationship between a young man and women. Okay? Now, like I said, in the former, men, evil is flaunted and celebrated. In the latter, in the subtle and beguiling tactic, it's hidden behind pleasure or knowledge. Okay? But it is a trap. Now, although this is still written by a father's perspective toward a son, it is important to note that this advice is gender neutral. Okay? It's going to say son, he, him, and it's going to use as a confrontational moment a woman. We could just as easily reverse those roles, okay? And we could apply this to our daughters as well as to our sons. The same spiritual undercurrent applies. God talking to his children. Okay? So, again, just a simple switch of pronouns, and God is also giving advice to the daughters. But because this is coming through the moment a father is giving his son the talk, okay, we see the particular layout. The evil men are our unrestrained nature, spiritually speaking, right? They're just up in our face, our unrestrained nature. We just want to be bad. I mean, honestly, we want to be bad. It's our nature. Can't help it, okay? And the seductive woman is the appeal to that same nature, but it's justified through a religious veneer, okay? So we could look at this and say the woman is really a false church, a cult, a set of religious-looking precepts, right? And this will not be the last time in Scripture that a church, a false church, a cult, is described as being a woman. Because very few women will confront you physically. There are some. There are some. I'm not saying that this is a never kind of a thing. It's kind of funny. My daughter showed up at the hospital, has left for a little while, and came back and said, "Hey, I'm here. I'm going to my my baby's room, and they said, and you are? And she said, his mother. They said, name, and she gave him the name. She said, well, you're not on the list. Yeah. And she was like, you better check that list again because you fixing to get a real good look at it, right? So she kind of got all up in his face. And I'm not saying that you ladies can't do that, but that is not the preferred or the typical. You're a lot more subtle, right? A lot more
Reserved.
beguiling.
Most of the time.
Yes,
They hit you-
most of the
They
time.
hit you from behind.
Ooh, beguiling.
Beguiling, right? That's what, see, I got that on my slide, beguiling. That's your word for the day. Okay.
She beguiled me into doing something I didn't want to do.
Okay, I got something crazy going on here. Really? Okay, here we go. All right. So notice verse 3, right? Her lips as sweet as honey, her mouth is smoother than oil. Flattering words, okay? A fawning nature. You want to know what fawning is? It doesn't mean a deer having a baby deer, okay? A fawning nature means to court favor by cringing or a flattering manner. To show affection, typically used to describe a dog's behavior. You've had one of those dogs, right? That follow you all around the house. You sit down, they're licking on you, trying to climb up in your lap. They come up to you when you sit and push their nose up under your hand so you could be petting them. You walk out for 3 minutes to go to the mailbox. You come back, they act like you've been gone forever. And they are just incredibly happy to see you come home, and they're so excited. Okay? Whenever, you think about how your dogs act or your dog acts. You see that mirrored in a person acting toward y'all, toward you, alarm bells better go off, right? But it's subtle, right? Now the dog, one thing about a dog, he's not subtle, right? But in a person acting this way, okay, the joke is, and you've seen this in various places in common culture, right? If a woman goes out somewhere and she wants a guy to pay attention to her, okay, forget the way she's dressed, but the way she acts for a minute. What does she do? Laughs at all of his jokes, right? Even if it's knock knock, who's there, right? Dwayne.
You're so funny.
Yeah, there you go. Dwayne who? Dwayne the bathtub, I'm drowning. Oh, that's so fun. Right. And so, same thing with guys, right? I love the way your hair smells, right? Well, no, that's Joe Biden's got that, sorry. Right? But they begin to pay attention to details that many of us don't, right? It's fawning, it's cringing, it's this kind of thing. And alarm bells should go off, because I'm going to tell you something, none of us are all that, even if we had a bag of chips, right? There's no, we're not that way, right? So something is going on there. Now, the last couple of verses that we read here, and let me just refresh your memories here. In the end, she's bitter as poison, as dangerous as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She cares nothing about the path to life. She staggers down a crooked trail and doesn't realize it. Now, and we'll get into a little bit of that in a minute, but it paints the picture of a person concerned with only the here and now, only the physical life. No, absolutely no inkling of an awareness of the eternal or the spiritual, okay? And they stagger through life the way a drunk person does, right? Even though they're not drunk, but if you've ever seen, so when I was in high school, when we're getting ready to graduate, this group of us, big bunch of us, we all chipped in a little money. We rented a beach house down in Galveston. And unfortunately, we didn't have that much money, so we couldn't get one right on the beach. We had to get one like a block or two away. And, in any group of high school buddies, there always seems to be that guy that is going to drink too much, too quick, and he's going to be plastered before midnight, right? We had two of those guys, actually. But we had that guy with us on this trip. And so about midnight, we decided to go down to the beach, right? And build a big bonfire on the beach. It was graduation night. We were free at last, right? We were going to have our own freedom parade. And down the road we went. And I noticed immediately he was walking funny, okay? And I don't mean staggering around. I mean, he was walking funny. It was not his normal gait. And I was like, what is the matter with him? Well, as we went down the street, somebody was playing a radio somewhere, and he said music. And he turned and actually did start staggering and walked. I've never seen anybody walk into a ditch and miss the step, right? Woo! And over he went. And then he couldn't get up out of it. He was hollering for help. That's this person, okay? Not physically, but spiritually. Completely unaware that there's an end, a judgment coming, right? That there's more to life than what we see here. And I don't know why this is doing this. I tried to do this so I didn't have to go back and do it on every slide, and I thought I did it, and it didn't work. Apparently it's working now. Okay. So let's look at the next set of scriptures, verses 7 through 14. Donnie a note says it looks like I might actually finish up early tonight. He's not here. Proverbs 7 through 14. So now, my sons, listen to me. My daughters, listen to me. Never stray from what I am about to say. Stay away from her, the immoral woman, okay? Or him. We can flip that and go both ways, because guys will put a line on a gal just as quick as gals will put a line on a guy. Okay? So like I said, we can very easily point this at a daughter as well as a son. Don't go near the door of her house. Not only stay away from her, don't get anywhere around her, right? But we're kind of that way, aren't we? Right? God says, stay away from that. We go, okay. He said, don't even go around it. I mean, look at the Garden of Eden, right? Don't have the tree, don't eat the tree, right? Adam was so scared that Eve wasn't going to listen. He added something to it when he told her about it. He said, don't even touch it. Well, what's Eve doing down there around that tree anyway? Right? She had to be like, okay, well, I don't eat it and I don't touch it, but look, I can stand right next to it. Right? I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. Okay? But we like that. We like children. And when we're told, what you got,
That's what Julie asked me to do.
Yeah. But when we're told not to do something, we want to go right up to the line and then lean over, right? Woo-hoo, look at me. Stay away from her. Don't go near the door of her house. If you do, you will lose your honor and will lose to merciless people all you have achieved. Strangers will consume your wealth, and someone else will enjoy the fruit of your labor. In the end, you will groan in anguish when disease consumes your body. You will say, how I hated discipline. If only I had not ignored all the warnings. Oh, why didn't I listen to my teachers? Why didn't I pay attention to my instructors? I have come to the brink of utter ruin. Not plain ruin, not extra ruin, but utter ruin, maximum ruin, okay? and now I must face public disgrace. Now, again, the gender here can be interchangeable. Okay, we've been talking about that, and this is on the surface of this. I mean, what we're talking about is adultery. Is that's what we're talking about. I mean, on the surface, that's what it looks like, right? And so, in verses 9, 10, and 11, we see the trap has been sprung. In the example that we're using, right, she's beguiled this man into her bed, right? And he's forsaken all he was ever taught, or vice versa, right? And as a matter of fact, in culture today, right, the ladies who do this kind of thing, the one-night stands, they've got a phrase, or at least they did have back in the day. They got a phrase they used to describe that immediate moment after, when you're leaving the house or the apartment or the hotel room. And it's called the walk of shame, right? Because you're trying to get out without anybody seeing you. When I was a kid, we didn't have any air conditioning in the house, and so we sat out on the porch. And we had a couple of neighbors. They would come over and they would sit on the patio with us. And we lived on a corner street, so we had a street in the front and a street down the back. Our patio was in the back, so we could see, and this was a major thoroughfare or a main road in and out of the neighborhood. And we got to noticing about every second or third night, a man in a trench coat with a hat pulled down. Now, hats were not a ball cap, like a fedora, okay? Pulled down, low over his head, hands in his pockets, and he'd be walking along the street, right? Well, we didn't have any homeless people in the area. And hats were not the fashion, hadn't been the fashion for 25 or 30 years at that point. So we got to keep an eye on him. And so one of the other neighbors managed to catch, he was parking a car in a driveway of a vacant house. It was for sale, but nobody was living in it. And then walking.
FBI calls that a clue.
Yeah, FBI calls that a clue. And then walking and going. And so they started watching. He's going around the corner and up the next block about 4 or 5 houses and into a house. And then coming back at some point in the night after normal and respectable people had gone to bed. So one of the neighbor men saved up all of the bean cans and cans of beans and corn and stuff come in. He saved up just several dozen of those and slipped over after he seen him walk by, slipped over there to that car and tied them all up on the bumper, pitched them all back up under the car. I mean, there was dozens of these cans. Of course, nobody went to bed early that night. We all set up. About 1 o'clock, here come that car down the road, cans bouncing and blinging her. Never came back. Never came, because he thought he'd been caught, right? Yeah. So the trap is sprung. You lose your honor. If you'll lie to your wife about having an affair, you'll lie about anything. People, we had a president here not too long ago who did not have sex with that woman. Those of you who are old enough to remember that, right? Mm-hmm. And lied to our face. On TV, right? And I figured he lied to his wife. He lied to his vice president who was out there defending him with a passion until suddenly, that depends on your definition of is, right? Mm-hmm. What is your what the definition of is? I think that's the way he phrased it, right? And suddenly the vice president just said, "Hey, you on your own, Bubba." But if you lie about that, because you don't want to get caught, and you will lie about that, what else will you lie about, right? You're a betrayer of trust, right? your wife has put trust, or your husband has put trust in you, and you've betrayed that trust. What other trusts will you betray, right? Etc. That's loss of honor. A loss of possessions or wealth. If you're having a sustained affair, you're buying gifts and paying for the little romantic hideaway and leading a double life, and that's expensive. Because normally the mistress wants assurances that she's as important as the wife. We had a friend of ours who he passed away suddenly, kind of unexpectedly, and when they went through some of his stuff, they found a checkbook nobody knew about and a house up in the hill country that nobody knew about. And he was always taking road trips looking for parts. He had a mechanic shop. And there was a woman living in this house, and surprise, surprise, right? And so a loss of possessions or wealth. And if, of course, you're buying a one-night stand, that's a loss. You're spending a lot of money. And then, of course, loss of health. And we see that in these three verses, right? Stress over somebody finding out. Disease. Only the regrets are left to you in verse 13. So ostensibly, adultery is what's being discussed here. Affairs between married persons, either the man or the woman, and someone else, whether they're married or not. And it gets expensive. And especially, I don't know, when I was a kid, we didn't watch a lot of TV. My mama wouldn't allow it. But in them days, TVs took a little while to warm up, so my daddy would always turn the TV on about 30 minutes or so before the news came on. And on Saturday nights, when we had hamburgers and french fries then my mother had a menu. Every night was something, right? Same thing. Every Monday was always meatloaf, because then she sliced that up. My daddy carried that for lunch the rest of the week. I hated meatloaf. We had meatloaf like clockwork, right? Anyway, Saturday nights was hamburger night. He would turn the TV on to catch the news, and the program on right before them was a show called Divorce Court. Right? Y'all think these Judge Judys and Judge Wapners and all that's a recent thing. Now they had Divorce Court, right? And of course it wasn't real, but they were actors who were actually speaking from transcripts of real divorce proceedings. And I can remember as a kid, there was always some woman on the stand weeping because her husband had an affair and a dalliance. And I do remember that, boy, when the gavel came down, the guy that was guilty of committing the adultery, oh man, I don't know what states they were in, but there was a lot of money that he lost having to pay those fines and stuff. So even in our corrupt society, having an affair is still looked down on by normal people. Now, we may not drag them out into the public square, right? But we do give them we shake our heads, and we think, how can I try, how does that person recover from that? And it's something that sticks with them. I know folks that 10, 15, 20 years ago had affairs, and they seem to be reformed now, but it's still a remembered thing, right? And trust, once it's broken, always bears that scar, even if it's repaired. It always bears that scar. I've counseled with people before, and the toughest thing is for the betrayed party to keep check of their emotions when, because of purely innocent reason, the spouse is late 15 minutes, 20 minutes late, maybe traffic, a wreck, something completely innocent. But that thought comes racing back in. Am I being fooled again, right? So, fix that. All right. It's also a losing proposition in the spiritual. Now, remember, in the spiritual, we talked about the immoral woman, the beguiling, subtle woman. was a church. And that's a good symbolism, because the church makes things that are wrong seem right, and it uses the religious trappings, right? The images of God and salvation. It uses those to justify these actions. And it completely fools people. That's why it works. That's why it's used in other places in scriptures as a symbol for a false church. Again, a loss of honor. You know, people on the outside are looking at you going, you're foolish, you're gullible, you're blind. What's wrong with you? Can't you see? Right? I mean, if you've been reading any of the news accounts lately, I mean, Scientology's been in the news. A couple of high-profile celebrities have broken with him and left, and now they're beginning to say, hey, look, this is what goes on in there, right? And honestly, okay, here's this gullible part, right? I've read L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. He wrote science fiction stories, and then he came up with a religion. Okay, the FBI calls that a clue, right? You gotta wonder, right? L. Ron Hubbard, you're kidding me. He met the aliens under the mountain. You know, he's got it all, right? But it's a loss of honor. You're foolish, you're gullible, you're blind. Here a few years ago, they had a TV series. What was it? Superman as a kid. Smallville, right? And the one of the stars got wrapped up in a personality cult by some guy in New York City, and I don't know what it was in. It was only initials, NXVM or NMVX or something. Anyway, and she's in prison now because she enticed others to join this cult. And so there was when it came to light, and she suddenly went, wait, what was I doing? Well, it was too late, right? And she's lost her wealth, her good name, you know, and if it's a church or a cult, right, seems like they always require complete donation of assets, right? You got to give me everything, or you got to give me most of everything, right? It's one of those kind of things. And finally, the loss of health, because in a lot of these, there's physical abuse, there's the isolation, stress, false teachings on medicines and doctors, and etc. And so, utter ruin. Your life is stolen and used up by a church that cannot deliver on its promises. Now, in the next few verses, we're going to see a shift in the conversation. There's still a spiritual undertone that can be seen, but the physical relationship becomes more explicit. Now, for church crowd, this gets explicit, right? There's nothing wrong with what we're going to read about, and this is what it's going to talk about, in the context of marriage. Outside that context, it's a problem, okay? And so we'll look at the next verses, 15 through 20. All right? Now again, I have read this many times, and you kind of, in the King James, and you kind of got a sense of it, right? But in the plainer English, if that's a word, plainer, it kind of gets a little blunt. So here it goes, verse 15, and we got, okay, we all adults in this room. Well, most of us anyway. She's like, what are you looking at me for?
I'm married, so. Yeah.
So it says this, drink water from your own well. Now, again, this is, I said for a church audience, I know we've all heard the jokes and the language, right? That's a lot more explicit than this, but drink water from your own well. Share your love only with your wife. Why spill the water of your... Don't jump to any conclusions on this verse. We'll explain it in a minute. Why spill the water of your springs in the streets, having sex with just anyone? You should reserve it for yourselves. The yourselves here is the husband and wife unit. Okay? Now again, and when we start to explain these verses a little bit, you'll see that you can still transpose the genders quite easily. This could be the man stepping out. It could be the woman stepping out. It doesn't matter. Never share it with strangers. Let your wife be a fountain of blessing for you. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. Basically, don't get rid of her just because she's getting a little older. Okay? For me, for myself, I'm just now getting her where I want her.
You just don't want to train another one.
I don't want to start over. But you start young and you don't know any better, and you basically wear into one another, right? You get grooves where she's got bumps, and she gets grooves where you've got bumps, and you just fit together like a puzzle piece. And when you got to start over, yeah. I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it's not, and people do it all the time, but it takes a moment, right? Rejoice in the wife of your youth. She is a loving deer, a graceful doe. Okay? Let her breasts satisfy you always. Again, don't read into that. We'll get to that in a minute. May you always be captivated by her love. There's a word. We're going to talk about that too. Captivated. Why be captivated, my son, by an immoral woman? Or, in other words, by someone you can't trust, immoral man or woman. Or, yes, fondle the breast of a promiscuous woman. Okay? So, let's talk about that. I titled this one, Finding Love in All the Right Places. Okay? So again here, we can easily swap out the genders, husband for wife, wife for husband. And drinking from your own well, of course, is immediately explained by the next part of the verse, by, loving your own wife or loving your own husband, your spouse, right? And of course, you should reserve it for yourselves. Now, this is a direct reference to the physical act, okay? But it also includes, and this is what many, many, many people miss, it includes the intimacy of the soul, right? What is that? Well, in one term, it's what takes the physical, mechanical act of reproduction and makes it into what we refer to as making love, right? It changes that act. The intimacy of the soul is sharing yourself and your attentions with your spouse. Not intentions, attentions. Okay? What your focus is. This is what he's talking about more than just when he says, drink water from your own well, share your love only with your wife. Yes, there's a physical aspect to it, but also this intimacy of the soul. Okay? Sharing your attentions with your spouse. After God, your spouse is primary. In case you don't know what that means, I've included a few more descriptive terms, right? Primary, first, foremost, major, most, leading, top. In all aspects of your life. You name a category, and the first person at the top of it should be your spouse. And yes, that includes the negative ones. Most aggravation. Spouse! Okay? Because if that person is what aggravates you the most on occasion, what does that mean? That means y'all are together. Y'all, you can never resolve a problem without a spirited discussion. Some people call that argument. Now, don't let your arguments get out of hand. But you have to have a little conflict in order to resolve a disagreement.
There's a saying, don't go to bed angry.
Don't go to bed angry.
Make up.
Right. Makeup, whatever you got to put on. You eyeliner, you know.
Yeah.
Even if you have to say, look, we don't agree, and we're not going to be able to resolve this tonight, but you're still my husband, my wife, and I love you very much, and let's talk about this in the morning when we're rested, and we've had a night to relax about it. And no, I'm not going to go sleep in the spare bedroom, and you're not going to sleep on the couch. We're going to leave the problem out here, and the two of us are going to go in the bedroom, okay? God is first, the spouse is next, not other people. This includes children. Now, I was very careful about that because, you know, children are important to the family. It's the reason the marital unit exists. It's why we have a husband and a wife, because of the children. But children who need and should receive copious amounts of attention, that means a whole lot of attention, should receive it from parents, not parent. If one parent is obsessed, and I have met couples like this, with the children, there is problems ahead for that marriage. Because what is one thing guaranteed that children are going to do?
Grow up and move on.
Right. I'm glad nobody said poop their diapers. They're going to grow up and move off. Even though y'all got some little ones. You ain't got a little one yet, but y'all got some little ones. And what they have in common is that one day they're going to be like my children, and like her children, and like his children.
Gonna be gone.
Gonna be gone. Well, sort of.
Come back.
Out of the house.
Out of. Well,
So, well, I still got one in the
you
house.
but that's a special circumstance. There's some illness and disease, and that's different. But they're going to be out of the house, right? They're going to grow up, and they're going to go have their own lives. And that man or that woman that you're married to is going to be sitting in the living room looking at you. And if you can't get over that, the loss of the children, right? So that's why I say the spouse, top, primary, first, foremost, right? The children are a product of that love. So both parents should be giving them attention, but the product of that love needs that coupled love for the rest of their lives. And no, when they're 20 years old, it's not okay to go and get a divorce. Well, we were just sticking it out for the children. Now they're old enough to understand. No, they're not. They're not. Yeah, it still will affect them. Okay. Not hobbies, right? Such as cars, fishing, stamp collecting, knick-knackery, also known as tchotchkes, right? You've been in homes where they got the little cat figurines just everywhere. Oh, these little cat figures. And who are those? Typically, those are single people, right? Single people, right? They don't have a spouse, and so the hobby becomes the focus of their life. But as long as there's a spouse, that spouse should be the focus, not the cars, the fishing. It's okay to go fishing. It's okay to like to go fishing. It's okay to have a hobby that is fishing, but not at the expense of the spouse. I know a couple of guys, he was, golf, man, he just golf. And he said he got to the point where he realized he was ignoring his wife. And he had a choice. He could either give up golf. No, there's no joke here. Okay? He could either give up golf or give up his wife. And so he went, he sat down, he had a long talk with her. And she took up golf. And they golfed together. And their thing was to go to golf courses. Found out she loved it. So they went to golf courses all over the United States. That's what they did for a vacation. They went and played golf somewhere. And he said, save their marriage because they were together.
That's blasphemy.
Okay? Not. Oh, man. I got to fix this. Okay. Come on. still talking about this. Now, verse 16, which is right at the very beginning, it says, why spill the water of your springs in the streets, having sex with just anyone? No, that is not what you think. It refers to, the waters here refers to passions or desires, okay? Your desires, your passion, these should be reserved for your spouse, not spread around. Don't have a passion for other people or other things. That passion has to be reserved for the wife, for the husband, right? Basically, it's okay to be like the dog when your spouse comes home from a day at work, right? Oh, it's been all day. I can't wait. I want to see you. I get tickled at one of the ladies that we sing with. You know, she says, "Yeah, we was over at this thing, and there was somebody standing next to me, and I said, see that man over there? I'm taking him home tonight." Well, it was her husband, right? It was, yeah, I know, right? But this is what we're talking about. She, rather than focus that passion or that desire on somebody else, she reserved it and focused it on her husband, right? So we don't spread that around. Now, verse 19, which says, she is a loving deer, a graceful doe, let her breasts satisfy you always. Okay, yes, that is a part of the female anatomy, right? Now, the Hebrew word used here, and I'm not kidding, is dad. That's the Hebrew word for breast. So basically, if we were to read that, it says, let her dad satisfy you. Okay, I know. I'm just, now they probably don't pronounce it that way, but that's it, D-A-D. Okay? And yes, it is a word, not work. It's a word used to call out the specific anatomy of the female body, but it is also used as a euphemism or a symbolism for the seat or the origin of love. Right? It comes from the breast. Okay? And this actually harkens back to the way a woman cares for a baby. Right? Life comes from the breast for the baby, and her love actually pours into that baby out of that action, right? And so it says here, let the love of your spouse satisfy you, or what I say here, let the love of your spouse satisfy you the way that a baby is satisfied, right? The way that baby is satisfied is the way you should be satisfied by your spouse, husband or wife, doesn't matter. Comfort. Your comfort in life should be received by the presence of your spouse. I am most uncomfortable when I am without my spouse. That's her right there behind me. Okay? Security. Now we tend to think of men as providing security to their wives, right? And for physical, bless you. For the physical, this is true, right? We're supposed to provide that security. Although there are instances where it's the other way around. But wives have or supply a different kind of security to their husbands, right? There are a lot of things that men do, they do because they know their wives believe in them. They have the security that no matter how bad it goes out there, when I come home, I'm still Mr. Right. My wife tells me all the time, do you ever get tired of being right? No. Never do. And as long as she thinks that, I don't care what y'all say. Y'all can make fun, make faces, make tracks for all I care. Because I have that security. Vice versa. Okay? So we should find that in our spouse. Not in what other people think, not in our jobs or the money that we make, etc. And love. Love. Not the physical act, the mechanical act, but that someone cares for us beyond themselves. Right? I tell Dawn all the time, I said, she'll be doing something. I said, come sit down. She said, but I got to do this. Come sit down. Take a break. Because she's always up doing, right? Got to have the house clean, got to have this, got to have that. Stop. Sit. Not a spring chicken anymore. Sit with me, right? And what this is me expressing love for her. I care, right? And some stuff can be left. Some stuff I'll do later, okay? But she also is expressing love for me by doing these things. I have to take care of it. The big joke around our house is if she were to die, I'd be dead in 2 weeks, starved to death, right? She feeds me. She takes care of me. Huh?
It is true.
It's true.
I said it was true. Okay. And in verse 20, we see the term captivated. May you always be captivated by her love. Why be captivated, my son, by an immoral woman? Okay? What is this term, captivated? Okay, now again, captivation, it can go both ways. The wife is captivated by the husband is captivated by the wife. What does it mean? It comes from a primitive root, to stray, usually to make a mistake or to transgress by saying, you're thinking, what? Yeah. To reel, to be, there it is, to be enraptured, to go astray, to deceive, to err, to be ravished. Have you ever been ravished? To sin through ignorance or to wander. That's what the captivation means. Now, the word is exactly the same. It's used here in 2 places, remember? May you always be captivated by her love, the wife, the spouse's love. And why be captivated by an immoral woman? So it's used both in a positive and in a negative context. And context here makes all the difference as to which one of these meanings, right? And whether these meanings like this, through the idea of intoxication, to reel or stagger, right? Well, that can be both positive and a negative situation. Now, I told you about this buddy of mine, right, who staggered and reeled right into that ditch. That was a negative thing, especially because he couldn't get up out of it, and we all sat around and laughed at him. Get up! All right. With the spouse, the context accentuates the positive aspects. Love drunk. You ever been love drunk? Can't think of anything else. Oh, he's so cute. Oh, she's so fine, right? How many of y'all seen Grease? Right? And they're both singing. They're both love drunk. They're singing about the other one, right? They can't get it off their minds. Can't think straight. Enraptured. Enraptured simply means to be filled with pleasure or delight. Ever been delighted about something? When you're delighted about something, you just can't quit smiling. Right? Mama brings that new baby into the world, and she just squeezed a bowling ball through an orifice, and it's right? And she's smiling and happy, and she's delighted with this baby. Delighted. Can't stop smiling. This is the way we're supposed to be with our spouse. We see them, even from across the room. And we should be delighted. But with the immoral woman or the immoral man, the negative aspects are brought to the fore. To be drunk with desire to the point of staggering morally. Right? I knew a guy one time, he believed that any person could be corrupted into an affair if the right other person came along. Right? And I'm like, what kind of a twisted, crooked, remember it talked about the crooked path, right? And I was like, no. Oh, yeah. I said, you get the right woman. How many, if you think about all the beautiful people which happen to migrate to the left, actually, most of the actresses and actors, they're about a half a bubble off, which is all why they slide downhill into the left coast. But they want all this physical attraction and to be desired. I'm trying to think of the name. The Kardashians. What do they do? What is their claim to fame?
I don't know.
Their attractiveness. See, and it's good that you don't know. Right? Their attractiveness. They go out of their way to make men, particularly, desire them. Right? And these men then, or, if you're thinking Chris Hemsworth or some of those guys, right, they're all muscled up and they're going to find excuses and to walk around without their shirts on, right? You stagger morally. You lose the ability to think straight. Therefore, you sin against God and your spouse, right? Okay, almost done. Look there, I managed to drag this out for a whole hour. For the Lord sees clearly what a man does. Nothing is hidden. I talked about that guy that parked and walked around the corner just after dark and thought he was getting away. The Lord sees clearly what was done. Right? And so, what happened to him with the tin cans on the bumper was God basically knocking on his door, saying, hey, buddy, I see you. Right? The Lord sees clearly what a man does, examining every path he takes. An evil man is held captive, and that is not the same word, by his own sins. They are ropes that catch and hold him. He will die for lack of self-control. And again, this could be her. Die for lack of self-control. He will be lost because of his great foolishness. Captive here means to catch and hold by force, as if a prisoner, a hostage, or a possession. It wasn't too long ago that there were many and horrible diseases that if you played the field, you eventually caught. And in the 1930s, they came up with this wonder drug called penicillin, and woohoo, that seemed to open the door, right? Well, then in the 70s, we got AIDS, which they still haven't cured, and some of the old diseases are coming back. And so while there is a physical protection to this, there's also a spiritual protection, right? That we stand straight and honest before God, and we behave ourselves accordingly. I know some of y'all not going to know who Yul Brynner is. Anybody ever seen The Magnificent Seven?
Yeah, so many
Right?
times I might get.
Okay, or Westworld, the cowboy in black, that's Yul Brynner. And he was, in the movies at least, the epitome of the tough cowboy, or actually he played the King of Siam at one point. But he was always a tough guy, right? Before he died, he made a commercial. He died of lung cancer. And of course, in the 60s, they started screaming about smoking. Don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. And when he died, he had a commercial. And he came, the picture came up, and he was sitting on a stool, as I remember. And basically he said, look at me. And he was ravaged by this disease. Gaunt, sickly looking. And he said, I smoked so many packs a day. I got cancer. I'm dying. Don't be me. Don't be me. Right? And that's what this whole chapter is. It's warning us not only about the physical, but about the spiritual. We learned in chapter 4 to guard our hearts, guard what goes in. Don't let the false church beguile us. But also don't let the world beguile us through the personage of a man or a woman, depending on your gender. Okay? Don't let that beguile you into a life of sin, because it's a trap from which there are consequences that you won't want to pay. And we saw that early in the verses. Okay? So, Next week, more wisdom. We've had to talk. Okay. Let's, have we got any prayer requests tonight? I've got already Charlie Smith, my grandson, Chad Stiles. Anybody else got a prayer? Yes.
Keep Caden on your list.